Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
In Trinidad and Tobago, cervical cancer still remains a serious health problem, ranking the third most frequent cancer among women in this country.
So you may be happily at home not knowing you might have the early signs or the early stages of cervical cancer. So the first thing is that it can be completely without any symptoms or signs.
WESN.
Good morning, this is Talking Point. I'm sure Michael Small once again before you to continue the conversations of the important matters of the day, or at least I guess you could say I start off selecting the topics and then at the end of the show you could join in and have your say. Because at the end of the day, editorial oversight at some point will be a matter of opinion. It will be a matter of opinion what is prioritized, because there is not unlimited time. And to be honest, I very much doubt most of you who are watching would want to watch me if I went on and on for 3 to 4 hours. That will probably not make any sense. Now, maybe if I was Joe Rogan, that's fine, but then you have to dip into a whole world of all kinds of things. Talking Point is about the current events and the issues, at least for the most part, and maybe how other things might be affected by those issues, might be affected by those circumstances. One of the issues now that has been an ongoing situation ever since this government has come into office, more or less, I think we might have gotten a month or so before they announced their first state of emergency. And the justification for that state of emergency, which is interesting when you look at it in hindsight, because when the Prime Minister was opposition leader, she was calling for a state of emergency just to deal with crime. And they eventually did that when they renewed their first state of emergency. But the first one was about specific threats against the government, which, interestingly enough, came essentially weeks after she said, we're going to get rid of unnecessary protection details for ministers who really don't need it. And then all of a sudden, a lot of ministers apparently need it. I say that mainly because we don't know necessarily who has what, who got what. But at this point, I I don't think I've ever seen a minister being driven around, you know, the black SUVs with the blue lights and et cetera, et cetera. I haven't seen that without a significant escort. Whereas before, maybe you would have seen one car, you know, depending on who it is. Obviously, if it's coming from the diplomatic center, it's the prime minister, it's going to be a convoy. But we have had sitting members of cabinet here in studio, and it's not as though they rolled with a large security entourage even then. So we're in a situation now where recently, apparently, because of a security incident sparked by a gang member last Friday, which I really wish they would tell us more, because it really sounds insignificant when you put it that way. But I have no doubt the newspapers could only report what they're being told, right? It sounds insignificant, or it sounds as though someone's trying to inflate a situation. A incident sparked by a gang member last Friday triggered a higher degree of protection of MPs in Parliament, and certain government officials had to be given additional protection. This is coming from the AG and the police commissioner. So one of the issues I have with this whole situation, right? We have threats against the government, but it doesn't seem as though we're making much headway. And this, to some extent, could be because of how the authorities like to operate. They don't want to tell us anything. So, in theory, some of the gang members that have been detained on the PDOs might be the individuals who would have been involved in anything, but we haven't necessarily gotten updates on that front. We're just being told repeatedly there are threats against members of the government, and on some level it's very difficult to interpret it, because I think if the government is not careful, it's going to eventually sound like the boy who cried wolf, and people are going to believe it less and less, and the justification of the state of emergency, the narrative behind it, might lose its significance. And it will be interesting to see how far that goes, to be honest, because at some point, I would imagine, if this continues, there may be a legal challenge to it, particularly because we went from a state of emergency. We had about a month when the Zozo building passed, so they just redeclared a state of emergency, which potentially is against the spirit of the whole thing. You're kind of just giving us a little 1 month break so you could re-engage the process. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody decides to challenge it legally. But we have another, this is technically, I guess, the third major situation or announcement about threats against members of the government. This country right now, this is from the AG, is at war. We've declared a state of emergency, we've renewed it, and we've declared an SOE again. That's our declaration of war. I'd just like to point out, if you're going to say these things, it's very interesting, because first it was Senator Naked saying that crime is a problem. Now the AG is saying we are at war, right? The government's targets in the current war are gangs. Then it makes all of the messaging, if we believe the members of the government, it makes the messaging from the TTPS seem a little, not completely, but a little hollow. So, part of me wonders, they're talking about this war. Do they know why this war is happening? What's triggering this war? What's triggering the gangs to threaten politicians? It's interesting that they haven't necessarily finished the narrative, whichever way it goes, because there's way too many questions on, well, all of a sudden, what's going on? Why now? What's the big deal? I could be wrong, but I hope the criminal gangs are not under the impression that our Prime Minister somehow has, a hotline to the White House and the Americans require her approval to operate in the Southern Caribbean. That's one of the interesting points. The issues people have with her communication style and her stance is separate on the practical matter of, well, whatever the Americans doing with regards to drug smuggling, every now and then we hear they hit another boat. That's up to them. We have no part in that. We have no authority over that. But the threats against the government, what does it mean? Because consider this. Is it that criminal gangs can so threaten the very fabric and bedrock of our systems of government? Criminal gangs who, in general, our society, our governments, we have allowed to just be relegated to certain geographic hotspots under the foolish assumption that, once they're there and isolated there, the rest of us are fine. Oh, you're from there too? That's unfortunate. Good luck getting a job. And is it that the chickens have come home to roost? Now, in this whole situation, I believe it's the AG speaking about the success with regards to the murder rate dropping. The thing is, similar to the whole threat against the government, I'm starting to have issues with incomplete narratives, which, to be honest, we had with the last guy. I didn't necessarily want to have to deal with it again. The murder rate did go down. But as was stated in the media a couple of months ago, do we feel safer? And at the end of the day, they could say that the murder rate went down, and then it stops. The murder rate went down, but they're not saying necessarily how. They're not giving us a reason to have confidence that it could be sustained. And also, it went down, but are they trying to say that this is good enough? Because the problem is, and this is the statement, politics has a morality all of its own, I think it's multifaceted, right? Because technically it's immoral to just accept, some of our citizens are going to die. The reality is any jurisdiction is going to have to accept. Now, you try your best to cause the perpetrators to receive consequences for what they're doing. But it is practically impossible to get the murder rate down to zero. But now the question is, to what extent, to what degree, in what capacity does a government look at the numbers and say, 600 too high, 300, I can live with that. Getting it under 300 might be too expensive. I'm not looking to do that. Because one of the things with the social legislation was the disjointedness of the government's presentation. The AG is saying that the legislation cannot have a sunset clause because the social programs are written into the legislation, which obviously then the solution is not to not have a sunset clause, but to have the social programs have their own legislation. Or maybe, I don't know, can the great legal scribes of legal affairs write a clause on the social programs to say that they won't be ended with? I don't know. But you could have just had a separate bill. I guess trying to pass two bills is too much work. Their mouths cannot speak an extra debate. That's asking too much of them. But that's a whole separate thing. The government's messaging was disjointed because everything the AG said implied we're looking at this as a long-term thing. Whereas Minister Sturge basically said, no, I'm looking at it as a short-term thing. Because as a defense attorney, I could tell you, this is Sturge's perspective, point of view. As a defense attorney, he's trying to sell us on the fact that once we lock up the gang leaders, crime will end. Arguably, he should know better given the fact that his government had to deal with gang leaders that were already locked up, potentially being part of a whole conspiracy to attack the government. But somehow, when we lock them up a second time, you know, we'll put them in the ultra-secret room where they won't be able to communicate forever and ever, and crime will be over. And we'll all live happily ever after. Or the state of emergencies, at some point, somebody's going to challenge it, and the courts are going to say, you can't have 16 state of emergencies in a row. It's ridiculous. It has to end at some point if you don't have any justifiable reason to continue it. We haven't necessarily seen the evidence. So it's fine. The first time, hey, I'm all there with you. Benefit of the doubt. I have no issue believing the government. It is what it is. I rather err on the side of caution. But now we're like 3, 4. Are we going to get to 5, 6? Benefit of the doubt starts to wear thin. And the thing is, the disjointed message with regards to national security. Well, what is the goal? Did you achieve something by lowering the murder rate, or are we still at war? Which one is it? Is crime a problem, or have we seen success? And more importantly, why exactly is this happening? It didn't happen in the PNM. Usually, they would have some reason as to why, to say, oh, well, the gangs this and the gangs. I mean, the Prime Minister already basically said that the yet to be finished Balize House 1B was financed by drug money. It's low-hanging fruit to then say, well, they were in bed with the gangs. That's why there were no threats against their government, but there are threats against ours. I mean, the implication, essentially, if you read through the weeds, read between the lines, is somehow the gangs work for the PNM. Yes, because I'm fairly certain the PNM looked so good with the 600 plus murder rate, doing their bidding, making them look great. At what point am I supposed to be confident in a situation? You got the murder rate down, but gangs are threatening you directly. What does that mean? What are they threatening you with? And what are you doing to get the situation under control? Because a state of emergency is not a long-term solution. It's fine if you're doing something today to get the situation under control today. But given the fact that they've had to extend, end, you know, they've reached the limit that they could renew, so they had to end it, stop, pause, and then start it all over again. I think at this point, the average citizen takes it for granted and does not necessarily understand if we're going to live this way. At what point now will our rights directly be encroached? Right now, they're indirectly encroached. We're not actually suffering a lot of issues because of the state of emergency, at least not most of us. But at what point will it come to a head? Because a nation was not meant to be governed this way. And if it's a situation where you have a state of emergency because you can't keep things under control with normal police measures, exactly what level of confidence am I supposed to have that your plans are going to be better than the previous guy's plans, and you're going to be able to implement the social programs that you yourself claims is needed in order to get us to a long-term solution? We've already had questions with regards to the budgetary priorities. Listen, we had it with the last guy. I have it with this as well. Although in this case, it seems to be that they claim to want to do social programs and then cut spending in certain areas, on top of the budgetary limitations to the protective services. Opposition MPs say they were unaware of a security matter. Was it that it was only targeting government MPs? Because it's going to start to sound like, I'm not saying it is. Don't question what is. One of the issues with trying to deal with government communications is it's not always clear what the reality is. All we would know is what they tell us. So based on what they tell us on the messaging, at some point, people are going to basically start to ask, is it all fake? The whole lot of it. We say we're going to get rid of security, but then we call this red herring to increase our security. We call this red herring to give us a state of emergency, to justify it, so that we could use the state of emergency to keep the murder rate down, because we don't really have a plan outside of that. That's what people are going to start to think. If you do not provide more details and you just expect people to accept what you say verbatim without question, this is a democracy, not a dictatorship. The Prime Minister went at great pains to make that distinction clear in a somewhat combative way towards all of CARICOM. Well, now you actually have to practice what you preach. In a democracy, we can question you. In a democracy, we can criticize you. And a proper leader will understand how to, when it's reasonable, accept it with grace. And not be ready for the usual bubble and bacchanal. I mean, there was a situation in Parliament between Saddam Hussein and Stuart Young. There's a whole exchange in this morning's Guardian, typed out, you can read it for yourself. It started off with the two throwing, well, Young threw a name, Hussein threw a name, and then mentioned in passing Stuart Young's brother, and then mentioned none of my family got locked up for drugs and ammunition, and then Opposition MP Stuart Young used a pronoun as part of a derogatory slur, although I'm questioning if it was directed at Saddam Hussein when it would be derogatory, or if it was at somebody else, because the statement was before she woke up from her slumber. Now, if it was directed at MP Hussein, my issue with it is, listen, when you joke with your friends, jokes at times, they're basically insults, right? But with a different context. And when private, it makes it funny. And when done by a professional comedian who knows what he's doing, then at times, it could be fine. At times. Well, context is always required. But Parliament is not a place for jokes like this, because it normalizes something and it vilifies something that, to be honest, it should never really be an issue per se. It's also just unprofessional And even if you want to say it's as benign as you could possibly interpret it, well then it goes off the level as some schoolyard nonsense, which on some level that was at the very least where Saddam Hussein was at, schoolyard nonsense. Minister Hussein, sorry. I forgot about that, I kept saying MP. Now the speaker interpreted that way. I do wonder if the one waking up from her slumber, well, might be somebody else. It was a whole situation where eventually both men apologized, but the exchange, I don't think reflected well on Parliament as a whole. It's very difficult to take things seriously when it seems as though members of Parliament are not being serious. It's very difficult to take things seriously, like, oh, there's threats against the government, there's threats against this, there's threats against that. When ultimately speaking, this is what Parliament has been reduced to. It's very difficult for us to give you the benefit of the doubt. You don't want to give us details, you don't want to give us information. The criminals know. This is the sad part. When it comes to all sorts of criminal justice situations, the criminals have all the information on their end. They know what's going on. Keeping it a secret is really just to keep it a secret from us, not to keep anything a secret from them for the most part. The fact that the people and authorities can't figure that out and then want to play these schoolyard argument games. So the AG has said, threats, there was an incident and there's threats and now we have concerns. That's nice. You can't even tell us what the threat is. At this point, it's not AG John Jeremy, it's Peter, crying wolf. That's how it comes across. And I really wish it didn't. But it won't be the first time a politician made this mistake, and it won't be the last. Now it's just a matter of how long will it take before a larger and larger segment of the population is going to have that perspective. And then it doesn't matter what the truth is, because no one will care to believe it, not when this is what we get. We get what we pay for. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears and welcome our guests for today's conversation. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSND Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Stroke is a leading cause of death and disability worldwide. Globally, 1 in 4 adults over the age of 25 will have a stroke in their lifetime.
Usually you would then have a conversation with the relatives, let them know exactly what's the status, what you were thinking.
We are not really ignoring them. We are acting on the patient at hand, after which we tend to communicate to them.
Yeah.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I'm back here talking about the WSND Content Capital Show, Michael Small, and I am joined, as I am around this time every year. You know, maybe we should make this more than once a year. We have with me this morning Dr. Angelique Nixon, Director of CAISO, and CAISO's Research and Program Officer, Chinnery Brown. Ladies, good morning. Welcome to Talking Points.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us.
It's good to see you all again. Now, one of the reasons why we have to have this interview, well, I did say I wanted an interview anyway, was because unfortunately my car mishap, I missed your event on Tuesday where you launched a new program. So I don't know if you just want to talk us through the new program that CAISO launched recently, Growing Spaces.
Yes, thanks so much, Sean. So Growing Spaces is a new project and program that builds upon wholeness and justice, which we've been on your show a few times to talk about. And Growing Spaces is an action or project that seeks to empower vulnerable and marginalized members of the LGBTQI+ community. And we are doing that through holistic supportive, and sustainable resources that address immediate needs and foster long-term resilience, well-being, and self-advocacy. And so this project is funded by the European Union. It is a human rights project, and it builds upon CAISO's Wholeness and Justice program, and it expands access to economic, social, and cultural rights. And really, it's a response to the needs of LGBTQI+ people in Trinidad and Tobago that emerge from inequality, marginalization, and the lack of legal and social protections that our community faces. And so the project is really focused on change for justice through interconnected programs focusing on wellness, food and nutrition security, and overall healing justice and support systems.
Now, one of the things, of course, first of all, I'd just like to say, CAISO, it's a full, I guess you could say, NGO. It's not just some sort of political lobby group. You all are there doing the work every day, not necessarily just all talk and bluster, but actually, like a lot of our other NGOs, having to meet with the challenges of the LGBTQ+ community. And it's one of those things where I think people kind of take it for granted with regards to Trinidad. We see the stuff going on in other parts of the world. We don't necessarily see it so much here. And we have a very unique society in some ways, as we've probably spoken about before, where there's, at times high degree of tolerance and then at times culturally low degree of tolerance. But within the last year, how has things changed? Because we have spoken at times past with regards to the general challenges, but it's very interesting because we had a major shift in politics, and unlike this time last year, now we actually got a year into the new administration. So the landscape of the country, the sentiments, the feelings of the country on a whole host of issues that might not directly have anything to do with the work of CAISO changed, but that doesn't mean that it didn't necessarily affect what it is you all do and the challenges that is faced by the people who you're trying to help, just like any other NGO is trying to help various aspects of our society.
Yeah, one of our key insights this year was that we're really seeing the impacts of changes in global geopolitical dynamics and violence, right? So there's been a lot of backlash, there's been a lot of anti-rights sentiment, and what we know from our clients is that shows up in ways that have increased some of the issues that we would have previously reported on, such as family violence, right? And we know that family violence can range from anything from like isolation to physical abuse and harassment. And we find that a lot of our younger clients are in socially precarious places because of that, and physically precarious places because of that. It opens them up to exploitation. And we also see issues around employment and housing discrimination faced by our community. So as we've seen these larger shifts, I think what we see is that it increases issues that were already long-standing.
Now, it's interesting you brought that up, because I know for other aspects of politics, I know a few anecdotal cases on other issues where people have gotten a little bit more extreme, right? I have to say it like that because I haven't experienced it firsthand. To what extent is that pervasive in our society, that for whatever reason, people now have more license, right, to, I guess you could say, be more aggressive with certain things, or to be more blatant or open or hostile over certain issues? Because I won't say what it is. It's something completely different, but it's just one of those things where you're kind of thinking about the person who you remembered, and hearing what you hear about them now, and the disconnect is so extreme, you don't know what to make of it. And I guess at the end of the day, when you're dealing with things like domestic violence, and I would assume what should be in some cases parental figures even, going so far as to being the perpetrators of the abuse, and Like how pervasive is it in our society? Is it like a lot of just extreme exceptions, or is it a general sense of things kind of moving in the direction?
Well, I think that we exist in a framework where there's a lot of violence. I mean, we are embedded in histories and are continue to be affected by histories of colonial violence, and that affects family violence. It has deep impacts, I think, on how we treat each other. I often say in my work that we have a lot of healing to do. I think that's maybe an understatement these days. But I do think that in the context of anti-rights and the backlash against human rights and social justice more broadly, and the ways that politics globally have shifted to much more conservative belief systems, really a lot of challenges in how we talk about equality and how we talk about rights. And of course, I think that's going to affect those who are most marginalized in our community when it comes to class and race and color and ability and migrant status. So I think those in our society who are already vulnerable for a range of reasons are going to experience more vulnerability when politics shift, when ideas about rights are questioned, or assumptions made about, oh, everything is fine now, aren't we all just equal? But the inequalities in our society have not gone away. They are still there. And I think they can be fueled more and more in this, in the context that we're in, where any mention of rights feels like we're under assault, or we can't even talk about inequality when it comes to gender-based violence, when it comes to marginalization, when it comes to the economy, or how we think about solving the most difficult problems of our time when it comes to climate. So many things are now being questioned in ways that I don't think they were before, even 5 years ago. From say 2 to 5 years ago, things have really shifted, and I think that all of us working in civil society, any of us working on social justice and human rights and thinking about our environment, we are all trying to figure out how do we work together to challenge those narratives and get people thinking about that there are ways for us to understand what has happened in the world, our understandings of history, our understandings of science, our understandings of what so many different studies have taught us, and our activists and our creative and communities who have shared with us so much, so that we have a better understanding of what is actually happening. Our scholars, our thinkers, and our artists have given us the tools, and I think we have to consistently remind ourselves of that, which is why I think in our work in CAISO, we're always working at different intersections. It's not just law, but it's also culture. It's also thinking about politics. It's also thinking about research and analysis. And so we do that from a range of places because it requires us to do that.
Now, one of the things, because I spoke to another NGO, Is There Not a Cause, and one of the things that came out of that conversation, she found that something like low-income housing was slowly being priced out of the reach of low-income citizens, which was a hell of a thing to realize when the means to try to help people are slowly becoming so expensive with regards to their income that it no longer might be able to help them. With regards to what CAISO does and the clients that you try to serve, has the economic realities and on some level, a lot of it seemingly, I don't necessarily know to what extent, seemingly is affecting people at the lower end of the economic bracket. And given that some of your clients are so, I guess you could say, they lack resources, they lack networks to necessarily get assistance from easily on their own, to what extent has the economic situation now really not just impacted their lives, but also potentially impacted the capacity you have to put on programs to help them, because now you're going to get hit from both ends. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we always emphasize that class consciousness is a really large part of what we do, because we understand that the folks folks who are experiencing financial insecurity, food instability, or working class folks are being hit by intersecting vulnerabilities. And so we at CAISO try to provide resources where we can through some monthly food card provision. And we've been seeing that, you know, there's never enough for the amount of need that exists. Also, we do work to try to help folks navigate social services. And what we have found is that there are difficulties navigating folks through that system. Of course, there's more need than there is resource, but also that there are things that make folks who are already vulnerable face additional barriers. So, for example, if one is looking to get certain support, you need proof of address. Proof of address is already difficult to obtain for folks who are possibly houseless or renting from a potentially hostile landlord to their LGBTQI plus status. And so there are so many barriers that we see coming up. And then also for this community in particular, there are also certain provisions in social service navigation and the social service grants that ask for you to identify an opposite sex partner as someone in your household to be able to have access to these grants and services. So we see that folks who are really in these spaces are experiencing that. And then when we speak about family violence as well, when we have a lot of young people who are being, you know, in our society, a lot of folks don't leave the house as soon as they turn 18, right? We have a culture that is kind of based on this familial stability, familial support. And when we have a lot of young people being put out at that age, and to be honest, even some of our clients would have told us that they were put out of their house before they turned the age of 18, right? What does that mean for them when, of course, then their financial stability is at risk, right? What does that mean for houselessness? What does that mean for issues around food security and hunger?
I mean, one of the things that, it's not the only issue I think that our population takes for granted, but I do think it's in a special situation, because I myself, I have a friend, he went abroad, and you know, the last time he came back, he basically told me, hey, I'm gonna get married. You know, he's part of the community. And the first thing I asked him was, well, where's the wedding? Because I'm hoping it's here, because, you know, then it will be easier for me to attend. And I forgot. I outright forgot, or didn't think, you know, it wasn't even possible. And he was like, well, you know, abroad, of course, because it's not, you just can't do it here. And it was just one of those things where I was like, all right. I myself am so accustomed to not having to really be bothered with when I say be bothered, I'm not thinking things of that it's an issue, or it should be an issue, or to make it an issue. But it's still an area where our society, I guess, there's a certain amount of inertia. I don't know to what extent there would be pushback, and not necessarily to focus on gay marriage, but to more the broader aspect of, look, it seems as though these sorts of things that have slightly unique differences to just the average, well, you have a runaway teen, or you have a teen kicked out the house. Well, it's a little bit more complex now, because the reasons why that happened could then also affect other situations. As you say, you might have a landlord that might have an issue with it. He might only be able to get a job, and the employer might want to make it an issue where it just complicates and it continues to compound the complications. So on what level do you think our society, we probably need just more public awareness, I would say, because regardless of what you think about the activism abroad, I do find that maybe we just don't have enough of it. Hey, I understand activism could go too far, but I would say we haven't really had enough, because I think a lot of people don't really they're not really aware of what it is the people who you help are going through. So they just don't know.
Well, that's why I think conversations on or near Ida Hobbit, and Ida Hobbit is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, and it is celebrated around the world or acknowledged on May 17th, so that's coming up. And it is a day that calls to action to eliminate discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer people in all aspects of life. And so I want to use this opportunity to just share that CAISO first observed Ida Hobbit in 2010. And where does this day come from? It actually began in 1990 when the World Health Assembly stopped classifying homosexuality as a mental disorder. So, it's really important for us to acknowledge that Ida Hobbit remains a moment when we are calling attention to what discrimination does for our community members. 36 years later, LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago and globally, regionally and globally, still face inequality, marginalization, and a lack of legal and social protections. And so in responding to that inequality, we make at CAISO, through our Wholeness and Justice program, we have been making interventions, legal, social, psychosocial, to help offer places of healing and resilience for our community members. And that's been our focus since 2020. And so not only services, but also our activism. We have long called, you mentioned the issue of legal forms of discrimination, which we do have in Trinidad and Tobago, that are, and we've spoken about this a few times, right, that our Equal Opportunity Act is a problem because it's supposed to protect people from discrimination in the workplace, in education, in housing, in accessing goods and services like healthcare, but it actively discriminates. And so it's a very troubling anti-discrimination law that should be able to be used by everyone, especially working class people who should be able to access redress and support. And people do. People activate and seek redress and support through the Equal Opportunity Act. But there are groups of people who cannot. And in fact, sexual orientation is explicitly excluded. And so many times when Trinidad and Tobago has been reviewed for human rights, folks have identified the act as being discriminatory, but it's supposed to be protecting you from discrimination. So CAISO since 2011 has long called for the Equal Opportunity Act to be amended, and we have activated a coalition of organizations, civil society, our fellow community partners, across a range of issues, from health conditions, which are not included in the EOA, as well as age. And so we have been calling since 2011 for that act to be amended, and it can be amended by a simple act of parliament because it is a new law and it is not saved. So that is something that we've long called for. But I want to point out, two things that we've put out in 2025. CAISO has put out a policy agenda where we address a range of things that are places that we want and we see where protection and inclusion can be, and that the government ought to be addressing. And we've called on our lawmakers and decision makers to do that, all governments across the board, to engage with our policy agenda and policy recommendations that come out of our Wholeness and Justice program and work with clients. And I want to finally say that this year's Ida Hobbit theme is the heart of democracy, because truly democratic societies must be built on equity, justice, and inclusion for all citizens, including those who identify as LGBTQI+.
I think my concern is because you're not just the only group, I feel, whose message is just not getting spread enough. And we just have a culture of avoidance, and it's very easy to avoid something if you feel, well, it has nothing to do with me, right? I mean, people do that with crime. People do that with big democratic governance decisions, right? So if they don't have a family member or a friend, or if they're not part of the community themselves, it's very easy, given how much we avoid so many things that directly affect us, to say, I could see a lot of people, I'll leave that alone. I don't want to go there, which, if it could happen to the most vulnerable, it could happen to you. And speaking about that, one of the last questions I want to ask, at least between last year now, I do think I've asked this before, but of course, again, another year has passed. The crime situation has evolved, morphed in a way. Of course, notwithstanding the social media apps targeting members of the community specifically, have you all observed if the criminal underworld might perhaps view members of the community who technically, yes, you've pointed out in many ways that they are vulnerable and have been exploited, but in crime generally, has the criminal underworld maybe looked at that? Because the police always want, as much as possible, don't make yourself a target. But obviously in certain situations, it's not as though members of the community have a choice with regards to certain things and certain circumstances that they find themselves in. Is that being exploited to be the targets for criminal opportunity?
Well, I would say again, this really does bring us to the conversation about vulnerability, right? And why social protections are important generally, because folks have more resources to be able to keep themselves safe when they are not discriminated against, exploited, when they are able to access employment, safe housing, and when your general society is safer, you know, those things are more accessible. You know, one of our other key insights was that really the weakened social networks result in increasing vulnerabilities for folks. And so I think this really does go back to your point about the fact that we might pretend that, you know, this issue only belongs to this person, this issue doesn't belong to me. But we're very aware, especially here in the Caribbean, it's always been a strength of ours to know that community is the thing that keeps us safe. Community is the thing that when we work together, everybody does better. And so I really do think it's important for us to challenge some of our notions of the things that separate us, and some of the notions that we have that violence for some is acceptable, because I think it really does encourage this idea that violence is something that we want to exist in our society. And if we don't want to see violence emerging from crime, if we don't want to see violence emerging from these other aspects of our world, we need to make sure that we ourselves are not encouraging of violence in these kinds of ways. So yeah.
Now, as we're more or less running out of time, I wanted to go, I'm not sure if we ever touched on this, but you mentioned sometimes young people who are not yet adults might be kicked out of their family home, right? As that's the response, I guess, of the parents finding out, okay, I am of this orientation, and the parents have a bad reaction and just kick them out before they're adults, which is technically against their responsibilities. But we have other responsibilities to young people, and that's with regards to schools. So on two perspectives, both with regards to what seems to be at times out of control school violence, at least in some schools. And I've heard some things that have been going on in schools that's really bad, not just violence, not necessarily at the community, but I would imagine if that could happen, then what else could happen? But also with regards to the development of our young people. I have a lot of questions with regards to our education system. And now when you throw into the mix now a young man or a young girl who, I remember in my time, it was already something of a complex thing that not a lot of people understood, and obviously not a lot of students understood, right, at that age. Like, what are your concerns for students now, both with regards to their development, having to navigate these issues, as well as the members who are not of the community, students who are not of the community, who, you know, they might not fully understand, and you know how mean kids could be at times, and then of course that could be in the extreme too with regards to things like school violence or other deviant behavior be affecting, you know, young people who are now discovering for themselves who they are and what their orientation might be. What's your concerns there with that? Because thinking about it, I would have a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of us should be concerned what's happening with our young people and in schools. And I think, I mean, as an educator, I think a lot about what our young people are going through across the board. I think about the fact that we need stronger education systems that ground our young people across the Caribbean because we are still grappling with a very deeply colonial education system that I think doesn't teach our young people to value who we are. We're not learning enough about ourselves and our amazing, complicated, and troubling. The histories that we come from, colonialism, slavery, and indentureship, are difficult to talk about and difficult to manage, I know. And we are in such troubling times around how we are reflecting on these complex and uh, and difficult stories, but they're there. They're a part of our families. They're a part of the social and legal fabric of our society. And so I think we are overdue for revamping of our education systems. I think we need to empower young people so they learn about their bodies. We need comprehensive sexuality education. We need education that helps ground our young people not only in our sense of self, but also who we are. And all of the research shows, particularly in our region, but also globally, that when young people are empowered and know more about their bodies and more about themselves, that they actually make better and more informed choices about who they want to be, the kinds of relationships they want to be in. You learn more about consent, learn more about health. And I think that helps our mental and physical well-being. So I do think, I think that we need, in fact, to address some of the harms that I think harmful cultural and social norms. I think we do need active education about gender-based violence so that we are learning about anti-violence or how to address violence. We need to talk more about the kinds of violence that we're seeing so that young people can be better informed and be able to say, no, I don't want this to happen, or I don't like the way this has happened. And when we don't have those conversations, I think we see what is going on now, where we haven't, it seems to be there's increasing levels of anger and violence and conflict. But I think that also mirrors what's happening in our society. These things are affecting our young people. And a lack of information, I think, also affects our young people. So we need more places of empowerment. And we also need to listen to young people and be guided by what their needs are. One of the things, Sean, you might remember we talked about some years ago was some studies that we did with surveys that were done in secondary schools where over 60+% of the young people said they wanted to have more education. They wanted to have more comprehensive sex education in schools. They were concerned about bullying. They were concerned about the violence that they were experiencing. So we know that from them. And I think there's been some more recent reports around what kinds of things that young people, want. So I would say that, and I would say that it is deeply concerning. And I know that a lot of civil society organizations are doing work with young people, and we need more of that.
All right, well, we're more or less at the end of our interview, so I don't know if you have any parting message you want to leave with the people of TNT, because, it's only so much time, but please, if you have anything that you need to maybe make people aware of, maybe something for them to think about, because I feel as though we need a good shot in the arm on a lot of issues, this included.
I mean that's a large one. I would just say, in keeping with the theme of Ida Hobbit this year, at the heart of democracy, what I would want to leave folks with is truly an idea that these issues are all of our issues, and that as a society that is concerned with decreasing in violence, with increasing of the thriving and social good of all, that when we say that, we really need to understand that everybody is included in our social fabric, and we want the safety and justice and equity for everybody that exists here.
Dr. Nixon? Well,
I just want to echo exactly. If any of us are unfree, I think one thing I'd like to leave is that Audre Lorde says that if any of us are unfree, then we are all unfree, right? Our inequalities are connected. The ways that if any member of our society is experiencing harm, then there is a problem, and it's an all of society problem. And so I just want to leave everyone with that if we are looking for transformation and change, then we need to come together and let's learn from each other. We have our differences. We're not all going to get along, and that is okay. But if we are thinking about the future, we want our young people to have that future, that justice is something that is deeply rooted in who we are as a people across our Caribbean region and in Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe that we want to end discrimination. And so I hope that we can work together to do that.
Well, that is Dr. Angelique Nixon and Research and Program Officer Chinnery Brown from CAISO. Folks, this is Talking Point WSN. Thanks, ladies, for joining me, and we'll take a break. When we come back, the conversation continues, and we'll open the phone lines later on. Stay tuned.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here on talk about the WSND Content Capital. Sean Michael Small with you. I will officially open up the phone lines a little bit earlier today, so you could call in all now if you want to join in and have your say. But I will somewhat continue at least my part of the conversation. I don't want to keep the members of CAISO back for too long. I think one of the things that we need to understand, and I've probably said this before, and I'll say this, because I do believe it, and I believe sometimes redundancy helps getting messages across. We don't necessarily always practice that the right way or when necessary. We need to view our situation as different to the American situation. Our race relations are different. Our situation with discrimination against LGBTQ+ is different. Our reality is different. One of the things I like about CAISO is it's not just an advocacy group that shows up at events and you know, shakes hands with important people and makes speeches and then goes home. No, they're talking about, hey, we have people with real problems that we're trying to help, like any other NGO, which tells me they have some level of, hey, they're doing the day-to-day grind with regards to this, right? Our situation is different, and I do wonder at times if people assume it's like what they see in other countries abroad, and they treat it a certain way because we might have an issue with what we see abroad, as opposed to really engaging with our people here and what they're going through here and what they're trying to say here. Because I'll always take this opportunity to make this point, because it doesn't just apply to people with different sexual orientations and the discrimination they might face. It applies to any situation that we might have the mistaken assumption, it might be a subconscious one, that, well, it's not important enough, or it doesn't matter to me. Because to flip what the members of CAISO just said in their parting message, why it's important to treat with the most vulnerable, no matter how small of a minority the demographic is in terms of population statistics. Well, first of all, there's the whole thing about if it could happen to anyone, to them, it could happen to anyone. But I think to go a step further to explain that, with regards to something like, say, crime, right? If you allow a segment of the population to be victimized in a certain way, it leaves the window open for that to be expanded. It was okay to do it to them, then it's okay to do it to them. Then it's okay to do it to them. You know? Oh, so we could abuse gay people, then we could abuse women, then we could abuse children, then we could abuse old people. Part of it is if you allow people to get accustomed to taking advantage of certain things, they'll feel entitled to take advantage, and then they will want to grow and expand who they victimize. Do you want to leave such a vulnerability in your society? Because when we said gangsters killing gangsters, we thought, what's the harm? Let them kill each other. It's just pests being killed off. But the problem was it allowed the criminal gangs, it opened up a door to higher levels of violence, for them to be accustomed to getting away with certain types of crimes. And as long as the people who were victimized had nothing to do with us, we were fine. But we didn't anticipate the day when it would go beyond those limitations. That in reality, there were restrictions that we assumed were on the situation, but there was nothing necessarily limiting them. We allowed it to happen in part because we didn't want to do anything about it, and because of that, it has grown to the point now where we can't do anything about it without some significant amount of investment and effort, more so than seemingly either administration in the last 2 terms care to admit. And of course now, one of the issues is if you abuse somebody, the repercussions, you could be facing that in years and years after, some of whom will respond so negatively, they themselves might turn into abusers, maybe in different ways, or deviants, lawbreakers, because they're lashing back against the system. Just like what we say about young people in general with regards to crime in general. And one more aspect of our society being left to be vulnerable can't be healthy for the society as a whole. And then on top of that, yes, that whole thing about a democracy, how you treat the most vulnerable, the weakest, the ones with the least voices to speak up for them, how you treat the most marginalized is telling of your society. It doesn't matter if it has anything to do with you, if you have any friends who are LGBTQ, if you have any family members, if you yourself are gay or straight, it doesn't matter. If we want to hold what is right and just and true, we have to do so for all, not for some. Because again, that opens the window. Well, if we could exclude it for them, then we could exclude it for them, and we could exclude it for whoever we don't like. And democracy is a hell of a thing. Democracy is an advanced form of human society. Because it's one thing to be democratic when it's a small group of people in, living in an apartment building or living in a small town. But now when we are 1.4 million people, approximately about 1 million voters, democracy is a heavy responsibility. Because at some point, no matter how strong you are, no matter how much resources you have, no matter how much advantages you have in your life, connections, influence, at some point you were born as a baby who needed the help of others, and you'll age, and you'll be reliant at some point on the help of others. No man or woman is invincible from the moment they're born till the time they close their eyes. No man or woman is untouchable. No man or woman is an island. At some point, you would want someone to help you. And I think it goes hand in hand, at least to an extent, to a degree, with the fact that we are not a culture that is accustomed to speaking up about something, speaking out against something. We are a culture that's more accustomed to holding it in, keeping your head down, not saying anything, don't rock the boats. And we've already seen in general what that does. Our politicians at times seemingly are running amok. And they don't necessarily pay heed to the few voices willing to speak out. It's easily to dismiss when only a few of us are willing to speak out, because technically you don't know if it represents the will of the people. So they're just haters. It's easy to just label critics, to any politician, opposition, government, haters, and then just ignore them, marginalize them, persecute them, discriminate against them. What could be done to them could then be done to anyone. Look, on some level, it's not necessarily the same exact thing, but what is NH complaining about? They were being cut off from even being allowed to tender. Because we don't have a culture of looking at an unfair situation and immediately jumping on it and saying, no, that is not what is supposed to happen here in TNT. So even big corporations can be marginalized, at least under the right circumstances. Because we don't have a culture of not just speaking out, but then listening to what that speaker has to say and being able to then move forward as a collective with that sentiment, with that message, with that issue. We don't practice that. I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't work for NH, so why do I care? I don't know anybody LGBTQ, why do I care? I'm not of that race, why do I care? I don't live in Tobago, why do I care? I don't live in Trinidad, why do I care? And we think about what separates us more, and we practice that. Well, I don't live in that hotspot, why do I care? Was gangsters killing gangsters over there? I'll just assume they're all gangsters. Let them all die. And now what happened? The violence spilled out to the rest of us. I mean, our politicians basically spend most of their time, probably more than anything else, not on policy, not on formulating sound economic strategy, but on vilifying their political opponents. Marginalizing their political opponents. And what's the consequences of that? We're left wondering, where's the governance? Where's the leadership? Because it's very interesting, this aspect of our society. It's a different lens. It's coming from a different angle, right? Obviously, things like low income and crime, that's a bit more of a general lens. But no country has a large scale, statistically large segment of the population being LGBTQ+. It's always a minority. So of course it's easily marginalized. But how we treat with it, with our culture, where on some level, and I would say this as well, we do multiculturalism and integration, I think better than anybody. Our racial tensions notwithstanding, which are very real, we still do it better than anybody. Because you could have a politician talking about people from the other side being of that race, whichever side, whatever race it is, right? You could have the supporters of either party bringing out racial slurs like I don't know what, and then come certain parts of the year, everybody eating roti. Or everybody enjoying their Sunday lunch with their Creole food, and so on and so on. Of course, during Carnival, everybody enjoying, at least before, calypso, and now soca. And of course, everybody also enjoying chutney soca. We allow our culture to be diverse and to spread and to integrate. But we don't. This one thing where you have a convergence of various mindsets. It's very interesting because it makes me think it's not about necessarily what we did or did not decide to do. I think the issue for us, you could say for other countries, maybe they went too far or maybe they're confused or whatever. But for us, we didn't even make a decision. Like many other things, we just shelved it and hoped maybe it'll go away if we just ignore it long enough. It'll just go away, right, magically. When the reality is, yeah, that's to some extent what happened in the earlier parts of the 20th century. But it didn't actually solve anything. It didn't actually make anything better. It was just easier to avoid it. But now in 2026, in the 21st century, it's harder to ignore these things. On what level did the means that the previous generations adopted, did it really cause harm? We just don't know, psychologically, to families, to individuals. And in part, society did treat it a different way, that even society itself either doesn't want to treat it quite that way or knows how to treat it that way anymore. Because I don't know if you would have had the same number of young people being kicked out of the house, because to do so would make it public. And at the end of the day, you didn't want to make nothing public back in the day. I have one older relative, I believe he passed. He left TNT a long time ago, in part because of it. Now, the family didn't necessarily have an issue with him, but I guess society, was different back then. But I feel we just really didn't make a decision on this, amongst other things. And the lesson to be learned is not just with regards to one minority and the concerns that they have, but rather, why is it that it seems as though we are content to not making decisions? We have a criminal justice system that needs to be fixed. Now, I know other people talk about it, but does the public talk about it? The public is still hung up on the fact that there is no death penalty, according to members of the public, and they need to reinstate the death penalty. The public is still not understanding the actual technical, practical realities of what's going on with the death penalty in TNT, much less what are the wider issues of the criminal justice system. And if that's where the public is stuck on, it's not surprising that the politicians have no incentive to do anything about it. The case with the guy that was convicted of murdering his daughter and his wife, he's now started the appeals process. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that he's going to have to actually face the death penalty. It's more reasonable to assume at the end of the process he's going to get life imprisonment because it's going to take too long. Now comes to the meat of the matter, the practicality of it all. With regards to the specifics, how much resources do you allocate to things like this? Now, in the case of laws, both the criminal justice system, but I'm going back to LGBTQ issues. For the things like laws, the issue is time. Now, granted, when I look at the legislative agenda of Parliament, it doesn't seem like that much. What it seems like is whatever agenda, they kind of just go in spurts, they do marathon sessions, and then, they pack up and go home, and I don't think they're really utilizing the year in Parliament to its fullest extent to treat with the issues with any sense of urgency outside of the social legislation, which seemingly was last minute. So to what extent is it that there's just not enough time on the legislative agenda? And to what extent is it that we could make the time, it's if the politicians are willing? Now, other aspects might require resources, and then it comes to the question of, well, we have a lot of problems. do you justify putting a relatively higher ratio of resources disproportionate to the demographical statistical size of the people affected in order to treat with the issues? Well, part of the answer, at the very least, is the fact that a lot of the issues are born from general issues of the country that are affecting everybody. And if you solve those issues, it would bring the challenges down. Part of it, too, is their new program being financed by the EU. They could get, potentially, for some things, at least foreign help. So it doesn't have to be all on us and the Treasury. But at some point, and I've said this once before, and I'm going to say it again here, at times, I'm jealous of America. Not with regards to people living in cities, you know, and all of that jazz. I'm talking about the people who are in various aspects of rural areas in America. Or people, say, fishermen on boats in rough seas. You know, areas with remote access. Areas where rescue is going to be difficult. Some sort of forested area, national park, hiking trail, you know, obviously out to sea, and so on and so on. Generally speaking, because it came up with regards to, the sentiment came up with regards to the war in Iran when the pilot was shot down in Iraq, and our whole task force was sent after him, and 3 planes were lost, and people questioned the economics of the decision. And there's a part of me that's like, and also the how right is it to risk the lives of so many other people to try to save this one? And I took a little bit of an issue with it, because essentially what those people were saying is, well, there are limits to the value of a human life. And you might say, yes, but I mean, you send however many men and they risk all their lives. Does it make sense? I'm like, you gotta understand the mindset. At least for certain things in America, the mindset is, we're gonna save our own no matter what the cost. Because we want our people to believe in our country. And that means you can take away all the politics, all the failures of the social programs, all the failures of the economics, and granted, yes, the wildfire situation in California went out of control. But by and large, in a lot of aspects of America, one person goes making on a hiking trail. It's teams with dogs, it's planes, it's helicopters. It doesn't matter that it's a lot of money being spent just to try and find one person. They'll mobilize, because that is the informal social contract that they made with each other from the moment they were born or accepted citizenship. When the stuff hits the fan, we'll go all out. So now here in TNT, on some level, while I understand you have to be fiscally responsible, yes, but at times, and not just on this issue, I hope, or I wish, when possible, we will adopt a mindset of, listen, sometimes the monetary price is not too big. It's the cost of what it does to society to see people lose their lives, go missing, get hurt. That's even greater than whatever price it is we have to try to rescue the situation. Paria. We have San Fernando, I believe, on the line. Call, good morning. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I am at pains to try to understand here, what rights does the LGBTQI plus community want that we, the citizens, don't have? What do they have that we don't have?
You mean, what do we have?
To understand that. Sorry, go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Do you mean what we have that they don't have? Because I think that's...
No, what we have... Okay, let me rephrase it, Sean.
Yeah.
What rights do they have that the regular citizens have? And what rights they don't have that the regular citizens don't have?
I think I know what you're trying to ask, but technically it's not what you're saying. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Because I feel the question is, what rights do the rest of us have that they don't have that they're asking for? Correct?
Yes, to that point. Because let me say this.
Yes, go on.
The LGBTQ community, apart from the issue of legalizing gay marriage, the prejudices that they are subjected to, that they spoke about it, the rest of society are subjected to those prejudices. I have no problem with LGBTQ people here.
Yeah.
However, because I founding members of CAISO has been my friends. I have had LGBTQ friends since primary school up to today. And my issue is, just like the rest of the society, you have to be subjected to criticism just like the rest of us for whatever we do. And we have a right to object to what you do, because, and this is a serious thing, Sean, what people are afraid of in the society is not LGBTQ people, you know. It's LGBTQ people trying to use whatever position they're in to try and influence young people into that behavior, because a lot of people see that as behavior. I use that generally. Some people don't realize it is not behavior. Some of these things are genetics. They're born like this. However, people don't want their children to be influenced by these people. And I'm saying these people respectfully. They don't want them to be influenced. They don't want the children to be influenced by them. So there is this pushback in the society. And this is where the society is not going to change with respect to that. The society is more religious in the main, and religion has an issue in the face of it with the behavior, and this is where we are. And I think in Trinidad and Tobago, LGBTQ people in the main have been allowed to go about their business. I would urge people I would say this to people. Those people are normal people, just like the rest of us. You know? Those people are people with feelings, people catching the tail, people in the daily grind. They are regular people. However, this is how the society is, Sean. Just like with crime and everything else, they just want other thing in this right now. They just want other thing in the society. You know, one other thing. And unfortunately, I understand, like every group they have the society and the representative as CAISO is, and they're trying to do the thing for the people. Open to my call, but my call get muted.
No, you're on here. No, you're not muted.
I thought my call. Oh, sorry. I thought it was muted, Sean.
No.
Yeah. So as I said, I have no problem with what's happening with them. They have the representation. However, as I said, they are just one other thing in the society, and I admire them for their stick-to-itiveness. But they have to also understand where the society is, and the society will only give so much. They would only budge so much, and I don't think it's on the shelf. It's just that they're not dealing with it right now. They ain't dealing with it. Wherever it is, when the time comes, if it rates said too much, they're gonna get pushed back. And this is a slow process that they have to understand. It's a slow process, a very slow process. But I would tell people, they're just ordinary people, just like me and you. I have a good friend. We've been friends since how long, boy? Since we were 8 or 9, and we almost retired now, and we're still good friends. I have one. There are so many good things about these people. So many good things, just like any other person in society. So don't be afraid of them. However, Sean, this thing where, as I said, people are afraid because they don't want them to influence their young people. They want them to influence their children. And there are some of them that are guilty of this, eh? There are some of them that are guilty of this. So that's just my take on it. As usual, Sean, you're making sure you stay relevant. I like how you put this in the mix as well. I know they were that you had them on a couple of times on the program already. So
yeah.
Good day, Sean. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, Mr. Sanfano. I mean, it's one of those things where part of it is you try to highlight things, and yes, there's only so much with regards to the economy to go around, right? So I understand that. The saving grace to that is, as I mentioned before, Chinnery mentioned, a good chunk of it will be solved if we just improve the general situation of the country and the economy and crime and so forth. It'll solve a good chunk of the issues that they face or the new challenges that they face. Now, I think don't underestimate same-sex marriage, because it's also tied into various legal protections and stuff like that, right? If you're trying to make a life together and for various forms. And it could also, in various things, like, does the situation which is causing you significant challenges qualify for certain programs, right? Because the result might be essentially, the net result or the effect might be the same as certain other types of discrimination or what have you. And then there's the fact that, yes, the Equal Opportunity Commission still, apparently, discriminates or basically says, well, this doesn't qualify for our work, which is a hell of a thing. And I think it makes sense given the fact that they also are discriminating against a young lady appointed because of, I assume, her physical disabilities. So I do think that from those two basic things, you have like a lot of various anecdotal issues in different programs or aspects that, yes, it could kind of boil down to one big thing, but it kind of is dispersed into other sub-issues for other programs or other aspects of society and what have you. And then, of course, I'm glad you brought up that point, because I didn't even necessarily think about it this time. We have a very weird relationship with religion in this country, I think. I think we have a very weird relationship with religion. And I'll speak about that after the next call from Santa Cruz. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Sean. You hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Good morning, caller.
Yeah. The trees that I told you that was cut bad on the North Coast Road, like the people lap it up. So it isn't really going to pose a threat to the road, but the mud, you know, we don't know how heavy the rain will be on the north, you know. So I said, let me just drop in that little information. And your next thing, this one is a serious one. There's some people with a bar just before the Maracas roundabout there. They clean on top of a hill. And some years ago, that same individual put a tractor in the old hotel road in Fishing Village and removed the government inverts, right? Causing a man who was on that place there planted a whole citrus field and lost all his money and labor. He came back and planted back the whole place, which is 2 acres, right? A crown land. Now that landslide caused a problem with the debris going and blocking a main course of water that's supposed to be going across to the river. That whole thing under the car park there is blocked right now. The authorities may have to dig it up to clear it.
Right now?
Right. The gentleman wasn't well for a couple months.
Okay.
The same individual sent people in the land there, and they cut down some trees that he had to hold the mountain, right? And the destruction there could amount to anything to about $400,000 damage. So he's trying now to see how best he could get his plants cleared back. So you see how the trouble is start with land, by? The devil be in the land, but he's a praying fella, so things supposed to work out spiritually. You have a nice weekend.
Thank you, caller. It speaks to what we speak. We've spoken about this before with regards to things like, I don't want to say limited to, but like town and country planning. And whoever else is involved with regards to land affairs when it comes to approvals for construction, what is being constructed, how it's being constructed. And listen, we're not the only country that has this issue, right? There are times in America, big America, even with the best of cities, where builders will do the wrong thing. Sometimes willfully, sometimes in ignorance, a lot of the times willfully. And then the damage after the fact is excessive, disproportionate to what would have been the cost of just doing it properly in the first place. So, I think we do need to re-examine how it is we go about developing land. But that's another thing I feel almost that we want to avoid it, but this is intentional, because who profits off of the pre-existing arrangement, right? And the issue is, in a lot of things, like with construction, at least construction, certain types of construction, we settle on an artificial economic balance point because we allow whatever nonsense. But when you look at, say, take Barbados, for instance, they don't have oil. Their price of gas, their economy, their salaries, you know, their cost of living, it's settled at a certain economic balance point. Now, they might not have the same quality of life that Trinis have in certain aspects at least. But the point is, you don't need to have advantages to be able to live. You need an economy to basically stabilize at whatever is sustainable. But now it's like, well, if you do this and you put this law in, it'll cost too much and contractors will this, and if you do this, then if you put in public transportation, taxi drivers will be out of business, and da-da-da-da-da, and then the cost of this road, and da-da. Right, but if we kind of did things properly, the economy would have compensated for it naturally. Similar to the air bridge, we subsidize the air bridge, then the balance point between demand and supply is skewed. And now we have to go through the pains of considering how we could incrementally remove the subsidy at least enough so that the losses incurred by the air bridge is not going to drive it out of business. Because, yeah, now the losses are $400,000. Is it necessary? This is where, however, it goes hand in hand with leadership and outside the box thinking. Because the box is, well, we're going to build where everybody else builds, right? As opposed to what parts of the country, maybe in the east, maybe in the south, you know, maybe not the north, but maybe in the east, maybe in the south, where, depending on what project you want to do, we don't have enough infrastructure development, but we have land available that might be suitable. And if we made the country more accessible, we could see more investments. Yes, I understand things like sea blasts and weather patterns are different for the East Coast and the West Coast, but still, that doesn't mean that it can't be done. Because in Tobago, you have Scarborough on the East Coast. You have development on the East Coast. Yes, Magdalena is facing the maintenance bill, but it can be done. Because part of the reason is we're kind of stuck in various corners of the country trying to urbanize and continue to urbanize, and it's getting ridiculous. Port of Spain cannot necessarily grow any bigger, at least not without public transportation. All of these things are interconnected, and the sad part is they're all kind of failing, to be honest. We're not developing other parts of the island. We don't have a good public transportation system, and we don't have proper controls to ensure that continued urban development does not go out of control and leave us in a situation like what you see with Port of Spain. All it takes is for a couple clouds to sneeze and Port of Spain floods because we didn't necessarily properly design the drainage around the capital city. All right, let me go back to Mr. Sands-Van on this point about religion, because he is correct. Religious conservatism is something that probably has, it's one of the biggest sources of inertia to societal change in many aspects of our society, which is interesting because we have different religions which at times seemingly amongst themselves, they don't necessarily show this off to Joe public. They compete against each other in some ways, sometimes. And they obviously, no religion agrees with another religion because every religion is selling a version of the truth. I believe in a religion, I believe it is the truth. I try as much as possible to not bring it up to anyone of a different faith because I'm not looking to have an ideological debate on who's right and who's wrong when it comes to faith. But we have multiple religions, yet on some level they all come together on this issue. But the thing is, we have a very weird relationship with religion because we will use religion, and listen, not just us, not just religious conservatives, people in the culture, in music, in arts, right, in urban culture, here, Jamaica, if you know, you know, will use religion to justify their discrimination, all the while ignoring key aspects of that religion. I don't believe in them things, them gay things. It's against the Bible. There's a lot of things you do that is also against the Bible. Conveniently, you don't bring it up. I have no issue when people want to say, hey, you want to point out that homosexual acts is against the Bible? All right, adultery is also against the Bible. Now, you don't see a movement in this country speaking out against adultery, do you? No, that's a joke. It's a horn, and we make joke, we make light of it. You know, if some politician get horned by his wife or her husband, you know, we laugh at it. If the politician is the one doing the horning, you know, we'll make a joke out of that too. And we don't necessarily have the same religious fervor on things like that. We don't even have the same religious fervor on the murder rate. Yes, priests might speak out against it in homilies and what have you. But we don't necessarily have, as a society, religious conservatives' beliefs pushing back against, I don't know, thou shalt not kill, at least for Christians. That should be a big one, right? That should trump just about everything else after, don't put anyone before the Lord else before, anything else before your Lord God. After that, I think you can make a case. Number 2, don't kill, or at least don't murder. So we have a very interesting relationship with religion. You know, some of it is influenced by the states and their anti-Christian pop culture situation, because it's very weird how they treat religion, how some religions are put on a pedestal, some religions are outright ignored, and some religions are vilified. Now in Trinidad, we just kind of ignore and take some degree of seriousness or seriously. It's very weird. And at the end of the day, I don't mind religious people having issues with where the direction Carnival is going. I understand why they say it. I don't necessarily think that their point of view is going to be successful. And I don't necessarily care to fight that battle with them or for them. I think that issue, it's a runaway train because society has decided we're not going to be religiously conservative during Carnival. We're going to do what we want. We're going to wear thongs Monday and Tuesday, which didn't happen back in the day. Back in the day, that was an exception. Now that seems to be the norm, amongst other things. And yet, for whatever reason, Mr. Sanford, I think, is correct. We're holding on to religious conservatism literally, seemingly, only for this issue. Now, I don't have a problem if you want to be a religious conservative, but then be a religious conservative across the board. Don't pick and choose what is important to you and what is not important to you. See, I am not trying to be a religious conservative. I am not trying to tell people what to do. Let people make their own choices. Certain things like don't rob, don't murder. Yeah, you know, like we could all agree to that, regardless of religion. But, and not every modern political issue that has a religious component is the same. They're not all the same, so don't try to lump them all together. Each issue has its own specific complexities. This has its own specific complexities, right? Like the buggery law. Was it really necessary to have that as a big issue where you had counter protests? I don't think so. Because the buggery law wasn't an LGBTQ issue. Heterosexual, straight couples, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? But we kind of forgot about that conveniently because it only mattered in that context, as though you don't have it in straight couples as well. So we're close with the last caller. Sugar on a Sunday line caller. Good morning, you're on here.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
You mentioned that Port of Spain wasn't properly drained. That isn't true. Port of Spain was very well drained. But you must bear in mind that the main drainage for Port of Spain was the Dry River.
Mm-hmm.
Because Port of Spain was up on that hill going up there. It's when they extended Port of Spain down on the flat.
Yes.
Right? But then you had drains. But their elevation was very slight above the sea, so that it still had flooding during high tide. But as soon as the low tide came in, it drained quickly. Since then, what has happened today is you have the normal thing I always say about enforcing the law and a minister saying the job is done. You have silt that is removed from the drains. Well, long ago, they were moved at the same day. It stays there and washed back down into the drain. You have people dropping litter all over the place, and nothing is done. You had up on the hills going up, I mentioned this to you some time ago, I don't know if you remember, when they had the slum clearance program, and they were supposed to move all those buildings and properly design the area. They pay all the people for the building, but they never remove the buildings, and the buildings still there. And this is causing the problem. I could name an next 40 reasons for it. And it's not only in Port of Spain, in the other parts of Trinidad, the same problem. I don't know if you have any questions or queries.
But, caller, that's what I meant. So we built on reclaimed land in Port of Spain.
The what?
Reclaimed land, right? The whole southern part, the port, that didn't always exist. And when we...
That was what you had, what I used to call you, the slum clearance program was supposed to give you to all them. All those people buildings were paid for, And the government never removed the buildings. It's still there. They're going right up to the top of Rose Hill and going back to Quarry Road and going back to the East River.
Right, but with Port of Spain, isn't part of the problem when they built out to sea, they reclaimed land, they built out to sea, and it affected the drainage?
No, if they was properly maintaining it, you will have no problem. When they build Rice Road and all those things, the thing continued. Is when we get independent, the problem started. Because we don't believe we have to work again. We could do what we want.
Because, I mean, it's a similar situation with regards to Invaders Bay. I would imagine, on some level.
Well, not exactly. Invaders Bay, if you look back at the old plans when they were going to develop that area, that was supposed to be for recreational purposes. You see what they do with it? Those are the things when you see politicians make decisions to interfere with the results of their research. You get these problems. I told you about all these buildings that they paid people for because it was unfit for human habitation. And they're still there, you could see that.
Yeah.
Now they're going to pay people in place you call yourself, down in the city. They're going to pay them for the building again. And I could bet my bottom dollar they ain't going to move them.
Yeah.
The problem is governance. And I always say that means enforcing all your laws and having a mechanism to make sure you have to the best laws up. But I have always mentioned sometime before you have some bad laws. Yes, you will always get laws, end up no longer being the best. Because either things change or because you had the kind of politicians we have here or whatnot. And that is why you have a system for each ministry to review their responsibilities and make recommendations for doing it. When you do this, the politicians will take it on. I could tell you I was it. Okay?
Thank you, caller. I mean, at the end of the day, you more or less, it does come back down to that governance. So, and the fact that I feel we don't enforce things in part that will lead to proper building codes and things like drainage and things like safety.
I agree.
And of course, clearing the mountains, and to what extent is the mountainside now, are we making it more stable?
Before you cut any tree in Trinidad, you know you're supposed to get permission?
Caller?
Any tree, even on your own land?
You see that last part there? Before you do X, you're supposed to get permission. I feel too many people look at that as a guideline as opposed to a rule.
That is not a guideline.
I know it's not, but they act as though it is.
If you read law, you will have two types of law. You have mandatory law, which you're supposed to enforce, and you have mandatory law, which you can decide if you figure it's in your interest. And we take mandatory law and deal it like permissive law.
All right, caller. We have to end it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. We're going to pay a price for these things, by the way. Huh? We're going to, the flooding in Port of Spain, technically, we already, to what extent is that water damage going to be a long-term issue? To what extent is, listen, on some level, I do think that religion is used as an excuse with regards to the questions of LGBTQ issues. A lot of people use it for an excuse because so many people who bring it up, they don't actually practice religion in any other aspects of it. That said, at what point, similar to a lack of planning in our urban development, is a lack of proper conversations on this and other issues. Because, again, Mrs. Steinman is right to say, one of many, right? The problem is, it's been a long time coming. And some of the things to solve wouldn't actually take that much effort. It just requires people to be willing Some of these solutions are not expensive and are not extensive and are not difficult. It's just, are we willing? Do we have the political and societal will to do certain things? And I would say no. And the thing is, it's not, the problem is, the root cause of that doesn't just affect LGBTQ issues. It affects the education system. It affects the lack of resources for the fire service. It affects a lack of town and country planning. It affects how we treat with situations like, look, they paid off the people on the airport land. And then it was a big thing about who didn't move. They paid, the professor just said, they paid off people for certain areas around Port of Spain. Did they move? No. Things like that. That one thing to avoid and avoid and avoid. And then when it's unavoidable, then it becomes some big political bubble where it's a big fight between people. And it becomes a huge issue that divides us, as opposed to, well, what if we just did the right thing from the beginning? What if we built a proper foundation to then build the house, as opposed to trying to build the house that is the nation of TNT on a shaky foundation? Somebody please tell me, what would you prefer? Planning, drainage, with regards to trees on the forest clearing on mountainsides, that's part of it. LGBTQ issues, that's part of it, amongst other things. Crime issues, that's part of it. With that said, stay safe. Remember your leaders of the Republic and to each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. Try to be open when you encounter people who might not have the same viewpoint or the same lifestyle as you. You never know who might end up being a cool dude or a cool girl that might be some of the best friends you would ever have, if you would allow them to be part of your life on a normal, equal footing. Have a good day. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN